Hello folks, it's Charlie in Westeros here, and I am back with 4 more major predictions for Season 6 of Game of Thrones. Because my thoughts are a little more lengthy this time around, I will divide these follow-up predictions into 2 more parts, and if you haven't seen my first predictions video for Season 6, then I strongly suggest you check it out before this one, as I will be referencing some of my thoughts from that video in this video. A link to it is right here, as well as in the info box below, and as always, there's a spoiler warning for this video, and remember, these are all just my ideas for the next season, and in spite of some crackpot thoughts I have this time around, nothing I am saying will necessarily come to pass because, just like Jon Snow, I know nothing. Anyway, enough faffing, here are my predictions for Season 6 of Game of Thrones.
Number 1, Assistance from the Vale.
In my last video, I mentioned Sansa's role in mobilizing support for the Stark forces in the north to fight the Boltons, but I never mentioned the Vale of Aaron's role in that respect. To start things off, it has already been confirmed that Lord Yohn Royce, one of the Vale Lords, will be appearing again in Season 6. The actor who plays Yohn Royce is set to film twice, once in July and once in December, which are of 2 very different months, and again with very, very different seasons. And, of course, this, in my mind, implies 2 very different locations and instances in time for Game of Thrones. My hunch is that the Lords of the Vale will likely start out south within and around the Vale of Aaron this season, and end up in the north near Winterfell towards the end of it. Remember that at the end of the last season, Season 5, Cersei permitted Baelish to lead an army from the Vale north in order to combat the treasonous Boltons and make himself the Warden of the North. With this in mind, he should now be marching northwards to fight against Boltons while championing the cause of 2 very different queens, i.e. Sansa and Cersei, and for completely opposing reasons, really. Keep in mind that after having married Sansa to the Boltons, he will now have to prove himself loyal to her by assisting her cause along with the rebel Northern Lords, including the Umbers as well as those wildling forces that will have joined her cause at this point in the story. Whether or not he tries to claim the North for himself, however, remains to be seen, but I do think his army will only really play a crucial role in the North towards the later part of the season, perhaps going so far as to assist the Northern Lords during a great battle they are in the midst of losing against Roose Ramsay Bolton. Now, why would his army take so long to go north and possibly defeat the Boltons? Well, here's a possibly crackpot idea I have for you all. So, for any sizable army to head north, and other than use the King's Road, the only suitable crossing is via the Twins, which is, of course, the seat of House Frey. We also know that Baelish was deeply in love with Catelyn Stark, so a part of me does wonder if he won't attempt this detour in an effort to avenge Cat, by asking Lord Frey to enter and cross the Twins under the guise of peace and serving Cersei Lannister. Then, so the logic goes, he would break that promise and effectively storm the castle, killing Walder Frey, along with most of his family, in an act of vengeance for Catelyn Stark and the Red Wedding. I have a hunch that they will not be including the character of Lady Stoneheart for the TV show, and it would certainly give a sense of retribution for Robb and Catelyn's death, and it would equally give rebel Northern Lords a reason to throw in their lot with Baelish and welcome his support, considering he would also be avenging the King in the North. But then again, maybe I'm just stretching it. At the same time, it would resolve a huge plot point relatively quickly, especially considering there are only supposed to be 7 seasons for Game of Thrones, and I suspect there are bigger concerns to the overall story than the Freys and the fighting in the Riverlands, like the looming invasion of the White Walkers, for example. To add on to this theory, I do wonder if Baelish might also co-opt the support of remaining Tully loyalists like the Blackfish, and possibly free the imprisoned Edmure Tully after storming the Freys' castle, or stronghold. This plot is quite lengthy in the books, but again, given certain time limits to the show, it would allow for that plot to resolve itself pretty quickly. It would also make for a twisted arc to Peter Baelish's storyline, since I don't think he's a character we are necessarily supposed to like. But imagine if, for this moment, we come to be thankful for him, or to him, for avenging the death of some of our favorite characters. It would be quite an interesting twist, that's for sure. Going back to my point, though, it's important to remember that currently Baelish has effectively alienated the Tyrells beyond repair, and considering he allowed Sansa to be imprisoned by the Boltons and did nothing to get Cersei out of the Sparrow's custody, these 2 female figures are likely wary of him, especially in Sansa's case, and he would absolutely need to do something drastic to regain their trust, and of course, again, mainly Sansa I'm speaking about here. Of course, in true Game of Thrones fashion, that doesn't necessarily mean that things will end up well for him, but at the end of the day, I do suspect his fate will be sealed later than Season 6. Anyway, on to my second prediction.
Number 2, the Greyjoys.
So I must admit that I have had some difficulty figuring out what the Greyjoys will be up to this season, but I do know this much. There are some things that still need to be dealt with in the show that occur in the books, namely Balon Greyjoy's death and the Kingsmoot to elect a new leader for the Ironborn. Not only has it been confirmed that Yara Greyjoy will be appearing in Season 6, but it also seems that we will have one of the Greyjoy uncles making an appearance as well, and I suspect it will be Euron in this case. It still hasn't been mentioned whether or not Balon will appear in Season 6, but in all honesty, his death could be mentioned at the very beginning of the season, leading to the gathering of the Iron Islanders and the forming of the Kingsmoot in one of the early episodes for the season. I also suspect that they may very well cut out the two uncles of Theon Greyjoy, in spite of it being mentioned in Season 1 that he effectively had a few uncles. Of course, they could also reduce those roles and simply play up the Kingsmoot as a showdown between Yara and Euron. Naturally, Euron will become the next ruler of the Iron Islands, and I suspect the show will try and simplify the plot by having him be the one to try to forcefully marry Yara himself in an attempt to bolster his claim on the Iron Islands. Yara will, of course, flee immediately, and with nowhere else to go in the islands themselves, she will head to the north, and eventually, I suspect, either end up at Deepwood Motte, like in the books, and then captured by rebel northern lords, or simply join their cause directly in fighting the Boltons for the torment they inflicted on her brother. I think her larger motive could also possibly be to eventually gain support from northern lords to press her claim in the Iron Islands in deposing her uncle, or even attempt to make her brother the Lord of the Iron Islands, especially if Euron styles himself King of the Isles and the North, just like in the books. But of course, I am entering very, very hypothetical, if even crackpot territory. In terms of Victarion's plotline in Going to Slaver's Bay from the books, I strongly suspect that will be cut out from the show entirely. As for Euron, again, things will continue as they do in the books, with him raiding the Reach, and I can only imagine that will play a significant part in the storyline of the Tyrells as Lords of the Reach, as well as the Tarleys, Sam's family. But of course, that plays into my predictions for Sam and the Tyrells, which will be in the second half of this video series. Now, a final slight crackpot thought I have concerning the Greyjoys is this. In the books, Euron is banished by Balon for having either seduced or raped their other brother, Victarion's wife. Wouldn't it be interesting, however, if in the show version they changed it so that it was, in fact, Balon's wife, Alanis, who was either seduced or raped by Euron, resulting in his banishment from the Iron Islands until Balon's death. In the second season, it was mentioned by Yara that both she and Theon are connected as they both loved their mother, her mention seemingly upsetting Theon. Maybe he is actually Euron's biological child in the show. Again, crackpot, and in all likelihood, Theon truly is Balon's son, but, well, something to think about, right? On that note, this concludes the first of 2 parts for my video series on 4 more predictions for Season 6 of Game of Thrones. In Part 2, I will deal specifically with Arya at Braavos and Sam in the South, as well as possibly a few other things I may not have touched upon, or even respond to your ideas and comments on my predictions so far, so be sure to share your thoughts, and I will do my best to address them in Part 2. Until then, please check out my other recent videos I've uploaded. Next time, I will be posting something a little different than I normally do, so stay tuned for that. But until then, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if you have enjoyed it. And that's all for now, folks. Peace out.